When I say the phrase emerging adults, what is the image that comes to your mind? Maybe it's the image of a 20-something sitting at home on their parents' couch. Is that the image maybe you have in mind? Emerging adults is a phrase that's fairly new. Just like adolescence was a phrase that was new at the turn of the last century, we talked about it a little bit last week. The phrase emerging adults is new to this century. About the year 2000, Arnett coined the phrase when he was describing people who weren't quite adults, but were no longer teens either. Stuck in the middle between transitioning. Sounds a lot like what we said about adolescence last week. Very similar concept with emerging adults. Cultural anthropologists tell us that there are changes in the culture that prompt this emergence of a new developmental phase. Things like economic changes, educational changes, and societal norms, societal behavior changes. What are some of those things? Well, for young adults who used to move into adulthood right out of the teen years, they looked at graduating from high school, getting a good job in the same town they were raised in, finding someone to marry, settling down, and within a year having a baby. The wife stayed home and the dad went off to work. That was life in the 1950s. And adulthood followed quickly on the heels of the teen years. That's not the case anymore. There are a lot more options for young adults today. Things like education. A lot of opportunities for education, and not just opportunities for education, a much higher expectation on education. I mean, think about it. Over 60% of teens who graduate from high school go on to college or additional training. And the reality is, as you know, studying for your master's degree, that in today's job market, really a high school education is not enough for a wonderful career. In fact, it's getting to the point that a four-year college degree is hardly enough. And more young people are starting to feel the squeeze of graduating from college and not finding a job and knowing they've got to go on to further their education. When they do that, where do they live? How do they pay for their bills? They don't move into adulthood. They're still emerging adults. Arnett said the ages could range from 18 all the way up to 29 years of age. They did a survey, Arnett and a group of others, actually a survey across the world, different countries, different developments in their industrialization and technology and their economic situations, and they found a couple of things that were consistent from country to country for kids, young adults in this age level. What were some of the things that these young adults, emerging adults had in common? Well, beyond education, higher expectations, and opportunities, there were also lots of job market opportunities because they're very global and they're able to move from place to place and location to location. No longer are people born and raised in the same town and get a job and get married and settle down there. No, they graduate from high school, they go off to college, they look at going to graduate school in a different location, and literally the world is their opportunity for a new location at starting life as an adult. So lots of options in the job market. In fact, we're told that between the ages of 20 and 29, they will change jobs on average 7 times. Lots of opportunities for jobs. Another thing that comes into play is the opportunity for marriage. You see, at one time, the expectation was to get married very young. 18, 20-year-olds were getting married right out of high school. Today, it's 26, 28 years old is the average of getting married. What are some of the things that contributed to that? Well, research suggests that the availability of contraception is a huge player in that. No longer is the expectation that you are going to have one partner and one mate you're going to marry and spend your life together. No, young adults seem to be searching and they fall in and out of love. Lots of options for love and lots of options for romance. Christian Smith and his team from the NSYR discovered that there were some common trends in emerging adults. We talked about some things last week in teen years about the impact on their religiosity. Well, he discovered that still the #1 influencer, even in an emerging adult's life, are their parents. which is pretty incredible. But when you think about it, those kids who are currently emerging adults, I call them kids because my kids are that age level, those kids who are currently emerging adults were supervised by what was called the helicopter parents. Parents who hovered over them, parents who made sure they were okay, who followed them to baseball practice and stayed there, parents who found them a coach for absolutely everything that they could think of wanting to try, parents who showed up constantly, hovered over these people, and made sure that they were growing up okay. Now the result is emerging adults who are getting ready to enter the workforce, who have graduated from college, and parents are still hovering. And so what do? They end up back at home. Christian Smith and his team also talked about the religiosity of these emerging adults and discovered that while most of them say that faith is important, the vast majority say that organized religion is not. It's not very important in their lives at all. Barna did a survey and asked, what is it about organized religion that turns these emerging adults away? And one of the key things he discovered was that it's too dummied down. They want to be challenged. They want to be engaged in their thought processes. They also say that organized religion is too demanding and unfriendly. So what is happening in your churches? How are you reaching out to emerging adults? Do you think about them? Do you think about their unique needs as they're going through this process of figuring out who their identity is, exploring all of the possibilities that are available to them and the options, and trying to decide which one they will land on? Young adults who are saying, you know what, I want to find the perfect life mate, and so I'm going to see what options fit and what options don't. I want to find the ideal job, the job that is my calling in life, and so we're going to try out a bunch of jobs, some that fit and some that don't. How can a local church respond to emerging adults, 20-year-olds, mid-20-year-olds who have college educations, who aren't married, who job hop from one job to another? Perhaps they're living at home, perhaps their status of where they live is changing. They go from community to community. What are some of the things we can do to respond to their unique needs? Arnett and his team, when they discussed emerging adulthood with emerging adults around the globe, asked them, what are some of the things that you would describe, words you would use to describe emerging adulthood? And without exception, they all said freedom. They said it is a wonderful time in life where they are going to have unequaled freedom from any other time or phase in their life. And then when they were asked, when do you think you're going to pass through this phase of emerging adulthood into actual adulthood? And they all said, by the time they were 30, as if they have this definite time in mind. Okay, I get to enjoy life and freedom until this point, and then I've got to get it together. And what are some of the clues that they said are indicators that they've got it together? They said it's when they are self-sufficient and independent. The research also revealed that emerging adults are structurally disengaged from adults. That's bad news for the church. They're structurally disengaged from other adults. What can we do within the church to create a bridge connecting those emerging adults to the rest of the adults in our congregations? Which makes us question, how do our churches' programs, systems, practices either engage emerging adults or separate them from us? Something I want you to think about this week. How can we engage the emerging adults in our communities and help them continue to grow in their faith through this unique and new phase of development?